let's now talk about compound meter. Compound meter, the definition of compound meter is that the beat that you feel is now basically divided by 3. So we feel a ba 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 ba. We feel that that beat is divided by 3. And also the notes that you see, the way that they're written, they are grouped in 3s. The top number of a time signature in compound meter is always divisible by 3. Now remember, we already talked about 3/4 and 3/2. So those were the simple meters, so those are the exceptions to the rule. But some other examples of compound meter might be 6/8. So using the rule that we already learned in the definition of a time signature, we know that the top number tells us how many beats are in the measure. So we know that there's now 6 beats in the measure. The bottom number tells us what kind of note got the beat. Well, when it was 4/4, a quarter note got the beat. When it was 2/2, the half note got the beat. So when it's an 8 on the bottom, the 8th note now gets the beat. So here's the way that a time signature, a measure written in this time signature would look. In 6/8, we might have 3/8 notes and then another 3/8 notes. So let's add it up. If the 8th note now gets the beat, which we're going to count as 1, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So remember, I said that they're often grouped in 3s. So the 8th notes are grouped in 3s right here. That's how you can tell the difference between if something was in 6/8, or remember, this technically would be accurate if it was written in 3/4. If it were 3/4, this would be my 1 and 2 and 3 and. But the way that this is written is not written in 3/4 because I already mentioned that we group the notes in groups of 3s when we're in compound meter. And we'll talk about the differences and why that is in a little bit. So if this is in 6/8, one other thing I want to show you is that really in 6/8, you can kind of divide the measure in half. There's never usually a note that goes over the middle of the measure, and I'll put my bar line over there. So really what you're feeling as far as the beat is that you're kind of feeling 2 dotted quarter notes, because a dotted quarter note is the same duration as 3/8 notes. So even if you're thinking about common time, when this got 1.5 beats, and this would also get your 1.5 beats, okay? But remember, now we're in compound meter. So this here, each of these 8th notes is a half of a beat. I mean, each of these 8th notes now is 1 beat. Each of these dotted quarter notes now, whoa, how are we gonna count that? Well, let's think about it. If an 8th note used to get a half of a beat in common time, now we're counting it as getting 1 beat, mathematically, you can just think about the values of everything in compound meter getting doubled, okay? So if you want to remember that this used to get 1.5 beats, how do we double 1.5? That now becomes 3 beats. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Usually this is actually what you feel in the music. You feel that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And a conductor, they might conduct it in 6, 1, 2, 3. They might conduct it in actually a 6-beat pattern, but usually and often they're just going to conduct it in 2. It's kind of like you're condensing it down. If that doesn't make sense to you, just remember that the value of everything basically gets doubled. And then you can, if you know your original note values that we learned in chapter 2 and when we talked about common time, you can just do the math and you can figure it out. So let's fill in a couple measures in 6/8. And then I'm going to put some measures up here and let you guys decide whether they're in 6/8 or maybe in 3/4 or something else. So let's see. How else could we do a measure in 6/8? I could do quarter note. Now how many beats do I have so far? Oh, well, it used to get 1 beat. Now, if the 8th note now gets that 1 beat, this doesn't get 1 beat anymore. This now gets 2 beats. So this would be my 1, 2, that could be 3. And then what else could I do? What did we just learn? Got 3 beats. How about a dotted quarter? Would that work? Yeah. And remember, we can also use rest, so I could have put a dotted quarter rest there or something like that. Let's do another one. Actually, let's think about what is the biggest note we could put in there. What note could we now put in there to take up the whole measure? Before, we used to put in a whole note in 4/4. Can we put a whole note in there anymore? Whoa. If the value of everything gets doubled, that now gets how many beats? That would get 8. So we actually would never have a whole note in 6/8. You might have a whole note if we were in maybe 9/8 or 12/8, but not in 6/8. So let's think about what value we would need to put in there. We would need to have 6 beats. So if the value of everything is doubled, let's think about what used to get 3 beats, which would be dotted half. So dotted half now is going to take up the whole measure in 6/8. Let's fill in one more, but let's change it now to 9/8. All right, I'm just going to do my 3/8 notes. So that's 1, 2, 3. What did we just say took up 6 beats? How about dotted half? That could take up the whole rest. Or if I did my dotted quarter, that's 3 beats now, remember, because it was 1.5 before. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I need 7, 8, 9. I need 3 more. I could put that in there again. I could put another one of those in there again. Or a pattern you're going to commonly see is going to be the quarter followed by the 1/8. Okay? Notice my 8th notes are in groups of 3s, and my beat really is kind of divided by 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the conductor might conduct this in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, rather than having to have 9 individual ictus or beats in their conducting pattern. All right, so there is my 6/8 and 9/8. I especially want you to listen to the America by Bernstein from West Side Story, because that particular piece is actually written in it's kind of like a dual meter. And by the way, meter is another word for time signature. So if you hear someone say, what's the meter? They mean, what's the time signature? How are we going to count this? But in that song, you'll hear, I want to be in America. And what you hear is, you're hearing 6/8, and then you hear another measure of 3/4. So on the I want to be in that's the 6/8, and then America, that's the 3/4. And it alternates measures the entire song, which I think really gives you a feeling of the difference between 6/8 and 3/4. So let's take a look at if you have some music up on, you're looking at a piece of music and you don't know what the time signature is. Let's figure out what it would be. So if this was your piece of music, okay, if this was your piece of music and this was one of the measures in it, would this one be in a common, or would this one be in a simple meter? Or would this one be in a compound meter? So let's think about what the differences were. We said in simple meter that the beats were grouped in 2s, and the beat was divisible by 2 the way that you feel it. We said compound meter, the beat was divided in 3s the way that you feel that beat, and that the notes are usually grouped in 3. So let's look up here. Well, do I see any groups of 3s? I don't. And you know, there could be like 1 in there, but you need to look at the majority of the music. And this is just one measure. But if you have a lot of music, I mean, there could be a group of 3. There could be a triplet in there. There could be something in there. But you need to look at the majority. Do I see any groups of 3s? I see 1 and 2, 3 and. So I have my 3 beats in there. Those are, the beat is divisible by 2. So this is going to be common time. And from there, you know that there's a 4 on the bottom. So just add up the beats. So this would be 1, that's my and, so that's my 1 beat, 2 beats, that's my 3rd beat, so this would be in 3/4. Let's do another one. Okay, so how about if we had that? So let's think about it. We would count it, we said in simple meter, as if the beat were divided by 2, those notes would be grouped in 2s. In compound meter, we would be dividing the beat by 3, and we would be having the notes in groups of threes. I see a group of three. Okay, now remember, if you see one group of three, don't let that be like your definitive answer. Look at the majority of it and make sure that that's just not one that's sticking out. So if we know, and we already decided, you know what, I think this is in compound meter. Also, we see that we can divide that measure basically in half, like we said, happens in compound meter. So we already know now that we would probably have that 8 on the bottom, which means that the 8th note gets the beat. And if we just go backwards, we'll do it that way. We have, because those are 8ths, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Quarter note now gets the last 2 beats. So remember, if we went from the beginning, it would be the same thing. I just didn't want to start off with the quarter note because you have to remember that the quarter note now gets counted as 2. But this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those are some differences, and that's how you can tell the difference between simple meter and compound meter.